My name is Ethan, and this story took place during my second year in college. After freshman year, I couldn't secure a dorm, so I frantically searched for off-campus housing. Eventually, I landed in a co-op, part of a small community of 3 houses situated a bit away from campus. It wasn't the most convenient location, but it was affordable, and with my bike, the extra commute didn't bother me much. Most of the residents were fellow students, but a few exceptions stood out. Some alumni, a couple teaching assistants, and a few older folks pursuing degrees later in life. However, one person immediately caught my attention, a woman, perhaps in her late 50s. Though she looked older, her hair was gray, and she moved with a slight limp like she had some back injury. She kept mostly to herself, maintaining a blank expression at all times. I guess she might be connected to the university, maybe as faculty or a long-time resident, but no one offered an explanation, and I didn't ask. The first odd encounter occurred in our communal kitchen. The other 2 houses had their own kitchens, so I was puzzled when I saw her in ours. She wasn't cooking or interacting with anyone, just standing there, watching as we prepared meals and chatted. I felt her gaze linger on me specifically, though I tried to brush it off. What struck me as even stranger was that none of the other housemates acknowledged her presence. A few nights later, while doing homework, I glanced out my bedroom window and saw her again. She stood in the middle of the street, staring up at my window. It was late and the air was cold, too chilly to be outside without reason. Unsure what else to do, I waved at her. To my shock, she didn't wave back. Instead, she jumped up and down a few times, almost like she was celebrating, then hurried off toward one of the other houses. A chill went down my spine. I had just confirmed that she was watching me, and now she knew which room was mine. When I asked my housemate Tyler about her, he seemed indifferent. "Oh, her? Yeah, she's been here forever. Best to just ignore her," he said, repeating something he had heard when he moved in. Unsettled, I kept digging until I got more information from Nate, a senior who lived in the same house as her. He told me she was loosely associated with the university, was a bit eccentric, but wasn't known for violence. Despite this reassurance, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One night, I almost ran into her outside my door. It was past midnight, and the house was quiet. She didn't react to seeing me, didn't speak, didn't even flinch. Instead, she just turned and walked away, as if I were the one intruding. After that, I made a point to lock my door every night. A few days later, I noticed my room key was missing. I tore my room apart, but couldn't find it. Irritated, I planned to make a copy but never got around to it. Then one night, I woke up to a soft, repetitive thumping from my closet. My heart pounded as I moved closer. Summoning my courage, I flung the door open and screamed. She was there, crouched in the corner, one of my ties wrapped around her neck, clutching a kitchen knife. Startled by my scream, she lunged at me. I managed to wrestle the knife from her, pinning her to the ground while yelling for help. My housemate Logan rushed in and helped restrain her while someone else called the police. The cops found my missing key in her pocket. Later, we learned she was the sister of the property manager, who had been allowing her to live there secretly despite her severe mental health issues. Rather than get her proper care, he had left her to roam the co-op. He was eventually charged with negligence. While I felt a tinge of sympathy for her, I couldn't forget how close I came to losing my life that night. I'm about to graduate, and while I'll miss some aspects of college life, that terrifying night will always haunt me.
This isn't exactly my story, but I was there when it all happened, so I feel like I need to tell it. I've lived in a quiet little cul-de-sac for over 15 years. My husband, Rick, and I moved in after we got married, and over the years, we watched as families came and went. But nothing prepared me for the events that unfolded last summer. A young couple, Sarah and Tom, moved into the house 2 doors down. They were newlyweds, both in their late 20s, and seemed like the happiest pair I'd ever seen. They'd often walk their dog in the evenings, holding hands and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. Rick and I had them over for dinner once, and they told us about their plans to renovate the house and start a family. We were thrilled to have such lovely neighbors. One evening, I was out watering my garden when I noticed something strange. A man I'd never seen before was standing at the edge of Sarah and Tom's driveway, just staring at their house. He was tall, disheveled, and had this unsettling intensity in his eyes. Before I could even think to approach, he walked away, disappearing down the street. I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back, I wish I had. A week later, I started noticing more oddities. Sarah seemed distracted whenever we'd chat. She'd look over her shoulder often, and once, when I asked if everything was all right, she just forced a smile and said she was stressed about work. Rick thought I was being paranoid, but something in my gut told me something wasn't right. Then came the night we heard the scream. It was almost midnight when the sound cut through the stillness, jolting us awake. We rushed to the window and saw Sarah running down the street, barefoot and clutching her phone. I called out to her, but she didn't stop, just kept running toward the main road. Rick and I called the police, and within minutes, squad cars arrived, surrounding Sarah and Tom's house. It turned out that the man I had seen was Sarah's ex-boyfriend. He'd been stalking her ever since she broke up with him, following her to the new house and watching their every move. Sarah had thought he'd finally moved on, but he hadn't. That night, he broke into the house while Tom was working late. Sarah woke up to find him standing at the foot of her bed. She managed to grab her phone and escape, but not before he cornered her in the living room. Somehow, she fought him off long enough to get outside, and that's when I saw her running. The police found him hiding in the attic, where he'd been staying for over a week. He'd been sneaking around while Sarah and Tom were at work, eating their food and sleeping in the crawl space above their bedroom. After that night, Sarah and Tom moved away, too shaken to stay in the house. We never heard from them again, but I often think about that night and wonder how long he'd been lurking there without any of us knowing. To this day, I can't sleep without double-checking every lock in the house. Sometimes, when the wind howls, I swear I hear footsteps in the attic, and I'm reminded that monsters don't always hide under the bed, they sometimes live right above you.
When I relocated to the coastal town of Coral Bay, I was just looking for a clean slate. I won't get into specifics, but let's just say a messy situation with an ex made staying in my old city impossible. I came into some money early on and made questionable choices about the people I let into my life. Lesson learned. Coral Bay was the opposite of my old life. Quiet, scenic, low crime. Most of the homes here are spaced far apart, which was one of the reasons I picked the area. But for some reason, the property right next to mine was much closer than the others, and the house itself was enormous. The place looked like it could house a family of 10. Naturally, I assumed a big, bustling family lived there. Turns out, I couldn't have been more wrong. While I tried to keep a low profile, I didn't want to be the rude new guy. I made it a point to introduce myself to everyone in the neighborhood, saving my next door neighbor for last. No particular reason, just how it worked out. Everyone else seemed warm and welcoming, mostly families with young kids, and a bit intimidating because they all seemed so successful. I wasn't sure how a single guy in his late 20s would fit in among them. When I finally went to meet my next-door neighbor, my social battery was nearly drained. I half expected a middle-aged parent to answer, but instead, a guy not much older than me opened the door. He had shaggy hair and an easy smile, introducing himself as Kai. I couldn't hide my surprise, and he immediately picked up on it, laughing and saying it was nice to see someone his own age. We bonded over feeling out of place among the family-oriented crowd. He invited me over for a drink sometime, and impulsively, I suggested we hang out right then. Kai hesitated, glanced over his shoulder, and said he was busy working. When I asked what he did, his smile faded a bit before vaguely saying, "Logistics." I couldn't help but notice the house was way too big for just one person. Kai claimed he lived alone, which I found hard to believe. But he seemed laid back, so I didn't push it. We exchanged numbers, and I went back home, not thinking much of it. For weeks, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I texted Kai a few times, but he always had some excuse about being too busy. Eventually, I let it go. People have their own lives. Still, I couldn't help but notice that I never saw anyone coming or going from his house. No visitors, no deliveries, nothing. I work from home, and my office overlooks his place, so it was hard not to notice. Then, one Wednesday around 2 a.m., loud music jolted me awake. At first, I thought it was just a vivid dream, but I peeked out my window and saw a row of cars lined up in Kai's driveway. It looked like a full-blown party, which seemed out of character. I decided to go over and ask them to turn it down. When I knocked, no one answered, but to my surprise, the door was unlocked. Inside, I saw a pile of shoes by the entrance, but the house was completely empty, despite the sound of laughter and chatter coming from deeper inside. Then it hit me. The sounds weren't real. They were recordings. Suddenly uneasy, I explored cautiously. A faint light from the basement caught my eye, and I crept down the stairs. The air smelled harsh and chemical. I heard a mechanical grinding noise and saw 3 men through a cracked door, all wearing heavy work gear. My gut twisted, warning me I was in danger. I crept back upstairs, but the basement door suddenly creaked shut behind me. Heart pounding, I bolted out the front door and into my house. From my office window, I saw men pouring out of Kai's house, arguing and searching the yard, but Kai was nowhere to be seen. Eventually, they all went back inside and the noise stopped. The next morning, Kai's car was gone. Days passed and he didn't come back. None of the neighbors had heard the noise that night, and they looked at me like I was imagining things. Months later, the house remains untouched, mail piling up on the porch. I don't know what I stumbled into that night, but whatever it was, I wish I had never crossed that threshold.